Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss another nasty little beastie about to jump from the Pandora's box of Brexit. That UK companies involved in procurement and supply are not preparing for Brexit because COVID has sort of knackered them. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news in politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, first of all, according to the Chartered Institute for Procurement and Supply, which, as you can imagine, represents companies involved in the distribution of our goods, many companies are unable to stockpile goods ahead of a possible no-deal Brexit, with a couple of major reasons cited for this. So, first of all, stockpiling more than you normally would means a greater outlay of cash. Many of these firms have already been hit hard financially as a result of the pandemic. They don't really have spare. So when the government was advised to extend the transition period until, we dealt with COVID, this was one of the major reasons for doing so. There were others as well. I mean, there was another one being that so the government could actually focus its efforts on dealing with the pandemic so that we wouldn't have to live with it longer than necessary, rather than ignoring it in order to focus its major attention on Brexit. Yeah, how's that strategy been working out? And the second reason is that these companies have already shelled out lots of money stockpiling ahead of a possible no-deal Brexit multiple times in the past. They were doing it at the start of last year. They were doing it towards the end of last year. The Conservatives under both Theresa May and Boris Johnson have shown no thought for businesses crippled by the uncertainty over their own negotiating madness. And so these businesses are not really inclined to make further investments, particularly when it's difficult to afford it, for an event that is not certain. Now, from a personal point of view, I get that the financial damage from COVID may prohibit some of these companies being able to stockpile above and beyond normal levels. And I also appreciate that. So if you've already been financially clobbered, that you may not have the profit margin left to hedge your bets on. So potentially better to just get stock you can shift in the short term, even if it's less than might be needed. It's better than overstocking and being stuck with stuff you can't sell, taking the double hit from not only that outlay of cost for those goods, that some of which you're not selling, but also for the cost of storing it for longer than you'd like as well. But for the general population, this is a major problem because we're already faced with a serious problem with our supply chain being disrupted by Brexit border checks. Then we have the problem with uncertainty over haulage firms. Will they be able to cope with the extra time, the extra expertise and the extra expense needed to deal with all the customs declarations? Meaning a potentially reduced fleet for our distribution network, because any lorry drivers that haven't used the system, that doesn't even exist yet, they're not going through the border. That might mean that there's an awful lot of companies who are not up to speed with this, all of a sudden not able to do that work. And now we're faced with having even our stockpile capacity not being used, because companies see it as too great a financial risk for them. And a spokesperson for the Chartered Institute for Procurement and Supply said that the government have to convince businesses that it's really going to happen this time. Because a lot of them, I know, I talk about this and many of you will also think, well, yeah, we think it's actually going to happen now. But we're not having to stake money on that. Those who are going, is it really going to happen? You need to convince us because you've said things in the past. And what this guy also said is that businesses would err on the side of understocking. And bear in mind what we're talking about here. So we're talking about a period of time that first of all has Christmas. So normally there's a lot of stockpile anyway to provide for that, followed by Brexit. So we've got a high demand period followed by a low supply period. That sounds interesting. And come what may, because we don't know exactly what Brexit is going to be at the end of the year, what we do know is that it definitely means friction at the border. There is no such deal that can stop that now. And in the same article that I was reading this, I was also seeing it was reporting on a survey that was carried out by a producer of logistics software, the Descartes Systems Group. And they polled 502 supply chain managers and found less than a quarter of them, it's 23% of them, had confidence in their ability to deal with the administrative tasks of Brexit. So that means 77% did not. And only 18% had actually prepared for a no-deal Brexit. Only 18% of companies polled had actually prepared for a no-deal Brexit. And these are companies involved in our distribution of goods. Now, the point was being made that most of these companies don't actually know how customs works. Now, that sounds odd for companies who distribute goods between different countries, but if you've only been doing that between EU countries, you have had no need to understand what would be otherwise a fundamental aspect of your business. I mean, someone in outside of the EU, if you were say you run a distribution company, say, and you don't know how customs works, people will look at you like, what? But no, you don't need to. You haven't needed to for 30 years. So we have hundreds of companies in our supply chain that do not have the experience, certainly, because the experience hasn't existed, but also don't have the expertise to actually manage supply from the 1st of January 2021. And the government have taken absolutely zero account of this. At no point in the past 4 years can I remember a single government minister even acknowledging this fact. Not that, an absence in my memory means that they definitely haven't, but what I can be sure of is that the government haven't done anything to counter this problematic gap in our supply capacity. So I decided to look up a bit more information on this survey by this Descartes Systems Group. There are a few more little findings. So on the theme of COVID and Brexit intermingling again, it found that 2/3 of companies had their Brexit preparations disrupted by COVID. Because obviously what we're talking about was, so there are companies who have been financially hit by COVID and they cannot afford to be stockpiling extra for Brexit. But how many companies exactly? Are we talking one or two smallish ones, in which case doesn't affect the overall larger picture? Or no, 2/3. 2/3 of them have been hit. So, those earlier reports of companies struggling, it's not just a few companies, that's not going to make a major difference. It is most of them. And then it went on to say only 10% of the companies polled are confident that they are certain they know what the impact of Brexit is going to be on their business. Only 10% go, yeah, we know. Because remember, they can't know exactly what Brexit's going to be. Now, there will be some companies who could maybe argue, well, whatever happens, we're going to prepare for this. But what that means is 90% of them are not really sure how it will affect them. Now, this could be caused by, on the one hand, being dependent on exactly what the deal is. There will be a lot of these companies who will, the difference between no deal at all and a bare bones deal, which might not be much better, but is better, has an effect on our business. But for some businesses, it may not be that. It may just be that they don't understand. They don't know how to process what's going on. They don't know how their business is going to be affected by Brexit, even if they knew what deal or not is going to be coming. And the thing is that the majority of British businesses are small operations. I cannot emphasize that enough. Businesses run by people who got some experience in an industry and then went it alone. They're not experts in their field. They learned just enough and had just enough about them to be able to go it alone, had the confidence to go it alone and carve out a little niche in the market, be their own boss. Well, now that market is changing and their experience potentially counts for nothing. Nothing at all, because the market's completely changing overnight. And evolution takes a while. A small operation isn't necessarily run by a natural scholar who can quickly learn about a fast changing situation with new regulations and procedures in time for Brexit. There seems to have been no accounting for this by government either. And one thing I found really interesting in the poll finally was that it seemed from the survey that the larger the company, the more concern there was about supply chain demands, or delays rather, sorry. And I thought to myself, now I'd like to know the reason for that, because is it because somehow the situation is worse for a larger company? Or is it that a larger company is more likely to employ specialists who more fully understand the implications of Brexit. And if it's the latter, then what you're talking about here is a suggestion that maybe there's an awful lot of small businesses who, okay, they may be worried about the Brexit changes coming, but not worried enough because they're not knowledgeable enough to really understand the full implications for their business. But anyway, there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.